Today, joining us for the conversation is Ms. Pallavi Pant and Tanushree Ganguly. We will focus on how effective narratives can change the real change that is required to bring on clean air. And without further ado, I invite all of you once again, to get the conversation started.
How can communicators start a conversation around air pollution in a way that instantly connects and people get a sense that it has an impact on me? The me story, how we as a communicators and the media scientists, how do we do that?
What I have at least noticed is starting with what is going to make you pay attention, or what is going to make me pay attention, is what matters to me every single day. So is it something that relates to me and my family members? Is it something that relates to how I earn my livelihood? Is it something that relates to decisions I'm making every day? And I think in communicating about air pollution, that part often becomes the sideline of the story. We lead with numbers, and I will put myself in that space too, because a lot of work I do is about, big numbers. Like, here's millions of deaths, here's X percent of deaths are because of air pollution. But trying to center the story, the person, and what it means to me is perhaps where we can start to pay more attention.
How Pallavi talked about, using terminology that people understand. How do you actually deconstruct a complex data set into like that 30-second messaging? Pretty much like how we did one piece at AQLI with the quantification. But broadly, how do you do that?
Perhaps AQLI has a shock value, but does it have the value that gets people to move? I mean, despite actually being, sort of behind this initiative, I'm not sure if it's doing that. But to sort of more subjectively answer your question, Ashima, I think the idea with data is that any data point that we put out or that we disseminate has to pass 3 checks, in my opinion. 1, it has to be local. 2nd, it has to be emotional. 3rd, it has to be personal. Because if and only if any data point passes these 3 checks, that's the only way it will resonate with people, right? It's almost about thinking about how the brain processes information. You will only, your slow brain will only kick in when any piece of information has passed the fast brain check. And for any piece of information to pass the fast brain check, it has to be visceral, it has to be deeply personal, it has to be emotional, or it has to be sort of super relevant to where you are at a point in time. AQLI is an attempt in this, but the morbidity of AQLI as a data point is also its limitation.
So how do we kind of, what local metrics or stories that you think can unlock city-level action, taking pollution beyond Delhi?
Yeah. I think the one thing that we tend to do a lot when we are talking about air pollution is talk about air pollution as a monolith in a way. We need to deal with air pollution, or we need to improve air quality, which is true. But when you start to think about how are we going to do it, it's not an air pollution problem. It's actually a transport, waste, construction, and yada, 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 like so many problems. But why are we fixated on saying we need to reduce air pollution? And that's like our overarching theme. And, I'm saying I'm implicating myself just as I'm implicating everybody else. And we need to break that barrier. So in order to take it beyond Delhi, I think first, we need to be thinking about very tangible things that are doable by the different groups that we're thinking about. And then second, we need to really break this language barrier. We really need to break the barrier of what or who is conceived of as a person who's worried about air pollution.
How do we ensure that air pollution remains in the news throughout the year?
Yeah, I'll put a little bit of that onus on the research community. So if you look at the kind of research that came out, let's say in 2019 or pre-COVID, a lot of that research actually critiqued or talked about, not just critiqued, but actually talked about air pollution from the policy lens. We are in the 5th year of the National Clean Air Program, and we hardly see any news stories on it. we 100% see a lot of stories around, AQI going up and down, but we don't look at air pollution as a long-term policy issue. So I think that there is definitely an opportunity for the research community to put the spotlight on air pollution being a policy problem and not just an AQI problem. So I think that is where I think that journalists and researchers need to talk together. And the other thing is, which I feel that there has to be an active dialogue between researchers and journalists. I think in some of the other environmental spaces, there is definitely more dialogue between the two communities. In the air pollution space, I don't see there is as much a dialogue. It's a very transactional relationship. It's a very on-demand relationship, right? I think that these relationships have to be nurtured for researchers to feed some of these items into the minds of the journalists and newsrooms.
And would it make sense if we kind of think of it of starting our communication, keeping health impact right at the top in terms of our messaging, ensuring that we are also localizing the story and not just making it like, Delhi-centric and things like that, and finding a way to sustain the momentum, and it's not just, a seasonal air pollution conversation. So if we do this health piece, keeping health at spotlight, localize, sustain the momentum, do you think as experts, would we have a little hope of moving from awareness to action?
Yeah. I will start by saying that I am an optimist, so my answer would be yes. I think we'll get there. I'll maybe edit just 2 things in your 3 points. One is starting with health, but also livelihoods.
One more thing. I think as researchers, keeping a constant eye on policy progress. We should not drop that ball.